Right, so, okay, it's time to talk about the alleged glitch in the Matrix idea. Okay, so let's talk about, first of all, the idea of propaganda and how since the 1990s, people have been fed ideas about this idea of a matrix. Okay, first of all, that's sexist. In the movie, as you would be well aware, unless you never got to watch that movie, then it's some character called the engineer working for a bunch of robots. Makes this simulated reality where humans get turned into batteries, and people's heads are convinced that they're in a reality they're not in. Okay, it's not fun. Keanu is a Buddhist, so he wasn't supporting the idea. Okay, so that idea, okay, is the kind of idea where someone, if you've ever watched a movie, if it's a rather engaging movie, you forget that you're watching it for a while. So when it came out in the cinema in the 90s, there were people sitting in the cinema, and there was a big way cinemas used to work. Now these younger generations with their Netflix and their YouTube probably don't know what that was. But the cinema is this old people's thing where a big screen called a projector used to be in a dark room with lots and lots of chairs in it and big honking loudspeakers, and people would sit there, eat popcorn and drinking soft drink and have Maltesers or lollies, and we'll watch a movie for about 2 hours. Okay? And then, they go home. So when people went in there, the environment, they make the lights go down so everyone's attention's focused on that big bright screen, and it sounds really big, so they're drenched in the movie. So it's not like this little screen on the phone where there's mostly the environment around the screen. There's the whole environment is the screen. So when people watched the movie back in those days, their whole body was being bombarded by the sounds and the colours and the story for 2 hours. And that movie is structured as such in its plot that it's deliberately designed to create this what-if scenario in people's heads where they wouldn't be able to tell if it was true or not. Okay? That what-if scenario is the stuff that gets people every fucking time. So what usually happened when people walked out of the cinema back in the olden days in the 90s, for you young spriggans out there, fugly on mate, playing it up a little bit, okay? The young spriggans out there, when the old people used to go to cinema, and if you're about 20 years old when your parents first started dating, yep, okay, and maybe even they made you after they watched The Matrix, you never know. A bit creeped out, aren't you? Anyway, oh, you're all weirded out. Anyway, grossed out by that one. Anyway, so when I watched The Matrix, okay, when I watched The Matrix and had that what-if scenario put people putting their heads, most people, when they walked out of the cinema, had this daze of grogginess, of being full of fatty, salty popcorns and sugary soft drinks and just overstimulated with sound and colour, And then walking out of cinema, of course, most people just queue up to the toilet first, unsurprisingly. And then after the toilet, as everyone's starting to slowly get less groggy, they try and remember where the car was parked, if they took a car to go to the cinema, at the shopping plaza, as it used to be. And then what they used to do was get in the car and go, oh, hang on a minute. We're in the car, yeah. How'd you like that movie, mate? Oh, holy crap. um, and then they were able to communicate a bit. Hang on. We better wake up with this one. Maybe have a cigarette or something, right? And then reverse the car out to go. And as they're leaving, they used to talk about the movie that they watched and whether they liked it and who their favourite character was. And with The Matrix, there was a distinct, noticeable difference from your average movie. What if? It was probably a movie series that, for its day, had that consequence on people like no other. Because you cannot possibly, in the story, you cannot possibly know whether or not it's true. Unless you meet Morpheus or something, right? And so all them older people, the 40 plus crowd, okay, they got out of the cinema, okay, with what if? And then they said, it's just a movie, don't worry about it. Going to the toilet and doing the poo is pretty real, okay? Like if you've ever done a poopy in the toilet, okay, you're pretty sure the world's real, and as others have commented, oh, well, it's a matrix or simulation, is it? Well, why the fuck did they program mosquitoes in? There's a whole laundry list of things you can add to that. If the world is a fucking computer program, okay? Okay, the programmers are cruel bastards, alright? Yep. Okay, so, basically, most people argued that as they were driving the car back home, and the poopies that they just done in the bathroom or the cinema was starting to leak a smell in the car, okay, and there was a bit of a poopy stink. They went, yeah, whatever, but what you just did, mate, that didn't seem fake. It seemed too real, okay? So people usually got over it. What's really strange, though, about human minds is that leads to something called compartmentalization, that exact activity, okay? There was a 2-hour time period where their bodies was being convinced, what if, and then the rest of their lives where it's, nah, right? Which means they had a real versus not real box, okay? And that real versus not real box is quite a fascinating thing to observe when it comes to the New Age movement and tech bro billionaires and the oligarchy type of stuff that goes on, and the stuff that they've actually done with that, which is even more disturbing. If you know about the history of the oligarchy in the USA, from Nerd Reich and other Yankee commentators, you'll know that Mr. Musk, who thinks Hitler's great, which is really sucky, has turned around and been part of a group of dickheads from South Africa, okay, who didn't like all these other South Africans who stayed there, right? It's some stupid South African crap as part of it, okay? You don't know, if you young spriggers don't know about South Africa, okay? Up until the early 90s, they had this thing called apartheid, which meant that black people and white people weren't allowed to walk on the same side of the road, and if a black person tried to, they'd get bashed up. Okay, that's the simplest way of putting it. And that's fucking stupid. Okay, it really is stupid. Okay, and so it was more than that. Though economic discrimination and all kinds of things were going on, and there was this group of individuals who were born in the early 1970s, usually, whose families decided that South Africa wouldn't be a good place to stay when apartheid was ending because they were making money off the apartheid. So they called it the South African blood money. And Elon Musk was one of those people. That's Elon Musk's father. But there's a whole bunch of others. They call them Peter Thiel and David Sachs, and there's probably a couple of others as well. And they've gone to these other countries, right, and started new lives there, so people didn't chop their heads off. Because unsurprisingly, there was some angry people. And they might have, had experienced other things like, having to pay reparations, for ripping people off or something. Because people were pretty pissed off. And it wasn't all like that. There was a lot of peaceful negotiations. That's where Mandela comes from. And it's really interesting that this comes up because one of the things they talk about with glitch in the matrix is the Mandela effect, where there's different people who remember different things about Nelson Mandela and it hasn't worked out in reality or something or whatever. So that's also a South African story, as it turns out. Nelson Mandela was the good guy in that story, in case you're wondering. He didn't want racism to stick, and he wanted everyone to walk on whatever side of the road they fucking felt like, as long as they weren't jumping in front of cars and carrying on like fucking dickheads. Okay? So, fair enough. And so these people with these South African blood monies have gone to United States of America in the early 90s, okay? And some of them in the early to mid 90s have done university degrees. And those three men just mentioned, not Mandela, the oligarchy, just so happened to have studied together at university and then just so happened to have seed capital from South African blood money and just so happened to start up tech businesses in Silicon Valley, and here we are today. Okay? So it's not really much of a surprise why there's a bit of a fascist stink to what's going on. And if you look at the timing of when they went to university, they would have been just old enough to smoke billies, get high on marijuana, maybe pop some pills, because there's a frat culture in the USA. Australia's not like that. Universities are for work only and me goreng. Okay, sleepless nights and me goreng, that's university in Australia. In the USA, it's different. In the USA, they had this thing called frats and sororities. And you can see them in the movies, where they take drugs and alcohol, and they're really rude to each other. So they would have been living in one of those, and they would have been off their face on drugs. And they would have been watching The Matrix, because that was the movie that came out around about them. And because they were all into computers and stuff like that, the computers and physics and things of that sort of thing, those guys would have gone into movies and gone, like, you just imagine their jaws dropping while they're high as kites. Like, so for them, that what if would be turned into a what if we actually made it happen. Now, when you see the difference between how the ordinary civilian, including members of the New Age movement, had a real, not real box for the Matrix with the what if scenario, and then those guys with their what if they invented it type of a mentality, then you start to see some of the nature of the fucking problem. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Musk has companies like SpaceX, Neuralink, in addition to Tesla Motors. All of them fellas and a whole bunch more, Eric Schmidt and blah, blah, blah. It's a whole bunch of them. Did some OpenAI thing, and then I want this Stargate AI, and then I want this artificial intelligence shit. Okay? There's a Star Wars program with the US military where they're literally zapping people from fucking outer space. Okay? They've zapped people out of space with artificial intelligence. With SpaceX and USS whatever. They've already done that to people. And they wouldn't be the only military in the world or corporate sector in the world that would have tried that. We just know about the yank ones. Okay? A lot of people, when they saw The Matrix, went, it's crap, it's fiction, and put it in a not real box. So they had two boxes. The New Age movement said, oh, we're living in a simulation, and sort of tried to relate to Hermetic philosophy. Okay? About how thoughts contribute to your creation of reality and things like that. Which, by the way, you should consider as a possibility, but also consider as a possibility that you don't necessarily know what your thoughts are. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. It sounds skits for the moment, but it's not really. We'll get there in a minute. So they went, what if, and then they found military bodies who gave them money and did projects for them which gave them money, and then they built stuff for them which gave them money, and the military is working on it and already working on it and stuff like that, so there was already a market for it. Okay, so these guys, when they saw The Matrix when they were in university, okay, saw, what if they actually make it happen? So a bunch of other people, like normal people go, the world is in a simulation. But some other people go, what if they treat people like they're cyborgs? If you look at some of that robotics industry and just how objectifying it is, particularly to women, and just how, if you look at it from a really sort of cynical kind of perspective, there's nothing wrong with cynical when you do. You should look at it from a cynical perspective because they're rude. Okay, there's an abusive mindset associated with that, a cruel mindset. So you should look at it that way. And where the part would look like a sound skits comes into it again is this stuff about them trying to put this artificial intelligence on people, okay, is very sly. Okay, it's sly. Okay, there is the normal effects, what they call the microwave auditory effects, or similar ideas, where two devices have to talk to each other, and a artificial radio wave and microwave passes through the air, passes through the wall of your house to make your phone work, etc., etc., hits your head on the way, and you might get dazzled or confused or something for a moment, or perceive something slightly, without, and interpret it in a particular way, but it's not really a real piece of information from your environment. It is technically, but it's technically an artificial one. So the discernment of the idea of everyone's walking around in this great big maze of artificial radio waves and microwave signals, and that's like a simulated layer of reality when you go through a big urban center and you're just soaked in it, If you live out whoop whoop, it's not quite the same. There'll be satellite dishes and whatever else, and in those environments you can be affected by things like that. But outside those environments, not so much. It changes, and so you've got spaces where you can notice the difference. In the big cities, not so much. So unsurprisingly, the new age stuff seems to be associated with the big cities. Out in the bush, you can do something else. Okay, you can walk. You can go fucking hundreds of kilometers, and if you just walking without seeing any of that fucking crap, and you'll probably die from dehydration. But anyway, unless you're really good at living out there, So those city people really got fucked over by the computers talking to each other and the signals passing through their head. Okay, called microwave auditory effect and a few other things. Okay, or EMF radiations or something. And then the other thing as well is that because they've got all these different computers talking to each other and whatnot, there is a range of signals that are for the computers, like your phone and that, and your TV, and that's not the entirety of the microwave or radio wave spectrum of bandwidths that they've got. There's some just outside of that, and they use them for the military and the secret coded stuff. And so one of the ways they save costs as a military is they do have their own military satellites, but they would use existing mobile phone tower infrastructure and satellite dishes and whatever to relay signals, but they do so fast without making sure there's detected by the other devices on a encrypted bandwidth that is outside the range for consumer products, and that creates a secondary military simulation grid, okay, that some people get affected by as well. So, I've been attacked by the US military and stuff like that. Well, maybe. Okay, maybe. That part's speculative at that point. So, for ordinary experiences, that can happen to people. There's also the other stuff. The stuff that gets really trippy. Okay, Neuralink, and as it relates to DARPA cybernetic implants, the Neuralink implants are incredibly rudimentary. They're basically like they're really rough and ready, rudimentary stuff. That's stuff from like 60 years ago. Okay, that type of idea they figured out 60 years ago. What the level they're actually at with the cybernetic implant systems for the cyborgs divisions of the military, global militaries, is in advance of that. So they have these that they're using they have nanotech. Now the nanotech wasn't intended for the general population as far as we know, but it was meant to be reassembled in the brain of the soldier, and then of course back to base operations relayed through mobile phone tower, satellite dishes, etc., etc. And so as a sort of form of synthetic telepathy, because it's not actually telepathy, they've basically got a walkie-talkie in the head. Okay, it's not real telepathy; it's just walkie-talkie stuff for those people. And that's fully trippy. And then there's the super trippy shit with privateering operations of SpaceX or the actual operations of USSF or other foreign governments, where they're able to send signals of the artificial variety to a target and have them assemble as programs somehow. Okay, so that would qualify as what they call the AI mind inserts, and so the when people are doing clearings for the AI, those are the ones you need to take into consideration. Technically, clearing all AI is a good idea. It's also a good idea to do discernment between artificial and natural signals, to know how artificial radio waves and microwaves are shaped compared to natural ones. This is, incidentally, unsurprisingly, the New Age movement likes rocks. Okay, and they like rocks because rocks emit radio waves and emit natural radio waves. They can absorb artificial ones, but they emit natural radio waves. So when you hold one in your hand, it gives you a different sensation to hear you're being like harassed by not harassed but experiencing. It's annoying for people who experience it. It's not always deliberate harassment. Okay. Just to make that clear, for the TI community, they think they're deliberately being harassed by the devil. It's not necessarily the case. They might be being harassed by evil people, in the tech bro sense of the term, but they're not necessarily being harassed by the devil. And it might not necessarily be deliberate harassment at all. It could just be the saturation in the environment too. So this is why these variables are being worked through, so you know what each one of them are. And so that particular stuff, okay, is important to know. And what I have the natural rocks are different from concrete and different from technology when it's emitting a radio wave, but they're all emitting signals. The other thing too, to help you with your discernment, the other thing that might help you to know, is that they have that's where the New Age movement was good. Where the New Age was bad is that they believed the world is a simulation and were part of the cabal that they were saying they were opposed to, in terms of their particular cultural precepts and how it relates to that movement. So when it comes to the military industrial complex in the United States of America, there are several cultural movements in the USA that aren't native to Australia. And should an Australian be exposed to it, somehow, they would potentially view those ideas with scorn and disbelief and lack of comprehension. There's different ideas they have, like so the hierarchy of the star signs, and they call it Star Lodge. Then there's um, their fake fight between the Masons and the Christians, and how both groups are part of a general intellectual ideological schism to keep people distracted while they move forward with that stuff in the background. And so you got to watch out for logical fallacies, okay, even with that idea, and especially with those ideas, perhaps. And learn your logical fallacies. Watch the videos about Kant if you can, especially ones from the direct philosophers. But if you feel like seeing rants about other things that are similar, go ahead. And also know that the people that are behind what they call the AI transhuman agenda are real. Okay, it's not aliens from outer space. It's humans doing it. Okay, and it really is a case of the plebeians versus the billionaires. This is not God versus the devil. This is not Christians versus Masons or Jews or whatever. This is everyone who earns less than $100 million a year against everyone who earns more than $100 million a year. Okay? Okay? And everyone out there, you're all John Connor.